But hotspots remain in rural Colorado. Morgan County is among the highest infection rates in the state, 3 times as high as Denver. In Georgia, new COVID cases have jumped by 64% since the state partially reopened on April 24th. A new hotspot is emerging in rural Hall County. NBC's Ellison Barber is there.
At least 24 shipping containers are expected to start arriving on this black tarp by tomorrow night. Hospital staff will then help to convert the shipping containers into a temporary medical unit to treat patients with COVID-19.
Still, there are new encouraging signs for America's pastime. Major League Baseball owners are proposing a shorter season starting around the 4th of July in ballparks without fans. As for New York City, it's not clear exactly when businesses here might join other parts of the state in partially reopening. But we've certainly come a long way since late March. Lester?
All right. Gabe Gutierrez tonight. Thank you. And now to those alarming scenes in the sky. Images from some crowded flights. Passengers wondering what happened to those promises of social distancing on airplanes. Here's Tom Costello.
On more and more planes these days, it's getting busier. Passengers shoulder to shoulder, squeezing past each other, many not wearing masks. On an American Airlines flight from New York to Washington today, at O'Hare Airport in Chicago, on a Spirit Airlines flight to Orlando.
The problem wasn't so bad going, but landing, everybody just got up and it was just standing and everybody was just clustered at one point.
This United flight left New York for San Francisco with 25 doctors and nurses who'd been treating COVID patients. But that middle seat not blocked off as United had promised last week. Today, United said blocking is the wrong word. Instead, it's limiting advanced seat selection for adjacent seats in all cabins, including middle seats where available. Regardless of whether that middle seat is blocked, infectious disease experts say a sneeze or cough can travel at least 2 rows forward and backwards.
How much of a risk is there just on a typical passenger plane these days?
Well, of course, there is a risk. This is the kind of circumstance that the coronavirus likes. It likes people close together because it likes to be transmitted that way. That makes it easier for the virus to go from one person to another very quickly.
The industry says most flights have fewer than 20 passengers. The airlines now calling on the TSA to check passengers' temperatures before they fly. The TSA hasn't yet decided, while Frontier Airlines says it will do that starting June 1st. Anyone with a fever of 100.4 or above will be denied boarding.
And a fever is a serious matter at these times. It may not be coronavirus, but again, it's probably something you want to have checked out.
United says soon it will start advising customers in advance when a plane is 70% full so they can either rebook or get a credit. American promising not to book 50% of their middle seats. Spirit says it will do it when it can. Lester?
Tom Costello, thanks very much. And tonight, new research showing young children and teens may be at greater risk from COVID-19 than was first thought. Our Kristen Dahlgren reports on the new developments that every parent should hear.
Tonight, one of the authors of a new study calls the idea that COVID-19 is sparing young people just false. Researchers looked at 48 children in intensive care. While a majority had pre-existing conditions, almost 1 in 5 did not. The research comes as concern is also growing over the rare new inflammatory illness, believed to be affecting children weeks after a COVID infection. As New York State is investigating 2 more deaths amidst 93 cases. Today, an alert to all parents of New York City school children.
We believe we can reopen schools safely and well in September, but we have to keep a very close watch on this syndrome to make sure that we attack it in every way possible.
NBC News has found cases in at least 11 states. The New York Genome Center is now studying the affected children, trying to determine what put them at risk.
If we knew the genes that are involved, it could really guide how these children are managed.
Symptoms include fever, rash, and upset stomach. Some can go into cardiac arrest. Andrew Lease was a healthy 14-year-old when he suddenly developed a fever and abdominal pain.
Did you know you had the coronavirus?
No.
In the hospital, his heart started to fail.
It brought me and my wife to our knees.
Doctors were able to save his life.
We do have strategies to manage the children, and they're uniformly doing very well.
I'm just insanely happy to be here.
Andrew now sharing his story as a warning to others. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News, New York.
Let's take a turn now to new developments tonight in the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery, a fourth prosecutor now taking over the case as the Justice Department says it's considering possible hate crime charges. Here's Blaine Alexander.
Tonight, the murder case of Ahmaud Arbery has a new prosecutor, Joyette Holmes, a district attorney in Metro Atlanta, appointed today by Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr.
She's been a prosecutor, she's been a defense attorney, and she's also been a judge. And so the most important thing is that we swiftly, transparently, and thoroughly get to a point where justice is done.
The case is now on its fourth prosecutor. Gregory McMichael, a former police officer, and his son Travis were arrested on murder charges 10 weeks after the shooting.
What were those past 10 weeks like for you? One day seemed like 10 days. I'm just sitting there waiting to get a call with some good news, but instead I received no call.
When you first saw the video, what was your reaction?
I was stunned, and I was sickened by it. And I think that's why it's important that we swiftly and thoroughly and transparency get to the bottom of this.
State investigators are also reviewing newly public surveillance videos showing a man who appears to be Arbery walk into a construction site and look around briefly before leaving. Investigators say they reviewed the clips before making the arrests. In a statement, lawyers for Arbery's family say the videos show his actions at this empty home under construction were in no way a felony under Georgia law. According to a police report, Gregory McMichael told authorities they followed Arbery, thinking he was a burglary suspect, and that Arbery violently attacked Travis, who fired after the two fought over the shotgun. A previous prosecutor said the McMichaels were trying to make a citizen's arrest, and Travis acted in self-defense. NBC News has not been able to locate an attorney for the McMichaels, who tonight remain in jail. Blaine Alexander, NBC News, Atlanta.
In 60 seconds, offices, restaurants, and supermarkets. What about out for a jog? A surprising new look at how and where coronavirus spreads. With people heading back to restaurants, salons, and offices, a surprising new look tonight at where the greatest risks may be. With that, here's Stephanie Gosk.
Slowly but surely, the country is opening up.
Doesn't matter if you want it to happen or not, it's happening.
Dr. Aaron Bromwich, an infectious disease expert at UMass, wrote a blog. The risks, know them, avoid them. And it struck a nerve, viewed millions of times. Dr. Bromwich writes, it seems many people are breathing some relief, and I'm not sure why.
What do you think people right now aren't worrying enough about?
Just enclosed spaces and how quickly this can start back off again if we resume what was normal 3 months ago.
Based on how MERS and SARS behave, Dr. Bromwich says it takes 1,000 virus particles to be infected. A cough or a sneeze can carry 200 million. But he says just being around someone asymptomatic long enough, even if that person is more than 6 feet away, is dangerous as well. Infection equals exposure and time.
The riskiest places to me are, enclosed indoor environments that have poor airflow and lots of people.
Offices, restaurants, and public transportation, he points out, have to be rethought.
We haven't thought about how to engineer a place to keep the air clean enough to be in there when you're dealing with a respiratory pathogen.
But there are places Dr. Bromwich believes we don't have to be as worried about, like supermarkets. With fewer people being let inside, masks are helping too. And there are very few known cases of people contracting COVID outside.
Runners without masks might get a lot of attention, especially here in New York City, but experts say that the chances of getting the virus from them is likely very low because they move by so quickly, limiting exposure.
But modifying behavior remains key.
This virus doesn't have legs, so it relies on us to move it around. So by taking away its oxygen, its fuel, which is us, you get it under control.
Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
The White House today recommended testing over 1 million nursing home residents and staff, with a total of at least 26,000 deaths at nursing homes. Cynthia McFadden tonight has an inside look at a solution that could save lives.
Connecticut has made a bold move, and we got a first look. Is this standard operating procedure now?
Absolutely. An all-COVID facility for nursing home residents getting out of the hospital.
Nursing homes were like a petri dish for this pandemic. We've had about 50% of our fatalities have happened there.
That number climbing fast. Connecticut's Governor Ned Lamont thinks forcing nursing homes to take COVID-positive patients, as most states are doing, is a path to disaster.
I'm terrified.
COVID-only facilities are Governor Lamont's solution. This was a 90-bed nursing home until it shut down last November. An ideal setting for a COVID-only facility, says Harvard professor David Grabowski.
Connecticut deserves a lot of credit. They're testing everyone, staff and residents. They're providing personal protective equipment for the staff. And then finally, they're creating these specialized COVID facilities.
Over the weekend, New York's Governor Cuomo reversed his controversial policy forcing nursing homes to take back COVID-positive patients and says they now have COVID-only facilities like this one on standby. Back in Connecticut, the National Guard is lending a hand. Like most of the country, Connecticut has struggled with the shortage of PPE, especially for nursing home workers. Some donning trash bags, they say, to protect themselves. Governor Cuomo has said it is not his responsibility to provide PPE to nursing home facilities.
In a crisis, the buck stops right here. And I can sit around saying, oh, these nursing homes are private enterprises. Why didn't they take care of their own people? Forget it. We're in a crisis.
Here, they tell us they have enough, especially as all the patients will be COVID positive. So, in other words, you suit up in the morning and you're pretty well set for the day.
Correct.
Meanwhile, one union leader tells us 40% of the staff in some facilities are COVID positive or not able to work due to exposure.
You two have volunteered to work in a COVID-only facility. I mean, how did you explain that to your families?
Because I'm sure of my infection control technique, and I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands.
After doing this for over 15 years, I think we're confident
49
in
years.
our ability.
Yeah.
Confident, too, that other states could save lives by creating places like this one. Cynthia McFadden, NBC News, Meredith.
Up next, Richard Engel from Europe, emerging from lockdown. All right, we're back now with more countries starting to reopen and a path many here are closely watching. Here's Richard Engel.
As Europe slowly ends its lockdown, today it was Viva la España in Seville, Spain. Restaurants are now open, but each table washed before customers sit down. Hotels and bars opening too. In the UK, the government is, for the first time, encouraging people to return to work, but asked them to avoid public transport. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who got so sick from COVID, official plans were drawn up in case he died, told Parliament today the nation needs to go slow.
There could be no greater mistake than to jeopardize everything we've striven to achieve.
In France, today was the grand reopening. Many schools back in session. The metro up and running. It's strange to take the subway again, but we have to get used to it, this man said. Paris's Champs-Élysées looked packed. NBC's Molly Hunter is there.
Shops are back open. Many Parisians are out for a walk or back at work, but experts urge vigilance. 3 new clusters are popping up across the country, one in the suburbs of Paris.
Clusters are breaking out in Germany too, but authorities stuck with their plan to reopen some restaurants and gyms, where doors opened to applause.
Italy also announced it's speeding up its reopening. Lester, this is all a test to see if we can coexist with this virus without dying economically until there's a cure. Lester?
And that is Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
have to say now that this whistleblower complaint, the redacted version of it, is now out in the public record, and we will at that point later this afternoon, the members of that committee will have had a chance to ask all of their questions to these two men privately. Already, we've heard from people like Mitt Romney, who's talked about the allegations being troubling in the extreme, is the quote that he used. Pat Toomey, another Republican, saying that it's inappropriate, the president's behavior, leaning on a foreign leader to, in effect, do the dirty work of his political campaign. Savannah.
She had 2 copies. All right, Jeff, thank you so much. And we see Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who has now sat down with the witnesses in place. And so in a moment, we would expect to hear usually opening statements from the chairman and the ranking member. Let's listen in.
At any time. The presidential oath of office requires the President of the United States to do 2 things: faithfully execute his or her office and protect and defend the Constitution. That oath, of course, cannot be honored if the President does not first defend the country. If our national security is jeopardized, if our country is left undefended, the necessity to faithfully execute the office becomes moot. Where there is no country, there is no office to execute. And so the duty to defend the nation is foundational to the President's responsibilities. But what of this second responsibility, to defend the Constitution? What does that really mean? The founders were not speaking, of course, of a piece of parchment. Rather, they were expressing the obligation of the President to defend the institutions of our democracy, to defend our system of checks and balances that the Constitution enshrines, to defend the rule of law, a principle upon which the idea of America was born, that we're a nation of laws, not men. If we do not defend the nation, there is no Constitution. But if we do not defend the Constitution, there is no nation worth defending. Yesterday, we were presented with the most graphic evidence yet that the President of the United States has betrayed his oath of office, betrayed his oath to defend our national security, and betrayed his oath to defend our Constitution. For yesterday, we were presented with a record of a call between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine, in which the President, our President, sacrificed our national security and our Constitution for his personal political benefit. To understand how he did so, we must first understand just how overwhelmingly dependent Ukraine is on the United States, militarily, financially, diplomatically, and in every other way. And not just on the United States, but on the person of the President. Ukraine was invaded by its neighbor, by our common adversary, by Vladimir Putin's Russia. It remains occupied by Russian irregular forces in a long simmering war. Ukraine desperately needs our help, and for years we have given it, and on a bipartisan basis. That is until 2 months ago, when it was held up inexplicably by President Trump. It is in this context, after a brief congratulatory call from President Trump to President Zelensky on April 21st, and after the President's personal emissary, Rudy Giuliani, made it abundantly clear to Ukrainian officials over several months that the President wanted dirt on his political opponent, it is in this context that the new President of Ukraine would speak to Donald Trump over the phone on July 25th. President Zelensky, eager to establish himself at home as a friend of the President of the most powerful nation on earth, had at least 2 objectives: get a meeting with the President and get more military help. And so what happened on that call? Zelensky begins by ingratiating himself, and he tries to enlist the support of the President. He expresses his interest in meeting with the President and says his country wants to acquire more weapons from us to defend itself. And what is the President's response? Well, it reads like a classic organized crime shakedown. Shorn of its rambling character and in not so many words, this is the essence of what the President communicates. We've been very good to your country, very good. No other country has done as much as we have. But you know what? I don't see much reciprocity here. I hear what you want. I have a favor I want from you, though. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent, understand lots of it. On this and on that, I'm going to put you in touch with people, and not just any people. I'm going to put you in touch with Attorney General of the United States, my Attorney General, Bill Barr. He's got the whole weight of the American law enforcement behind him. And I'm going to put you in touch with Rudy. You're going to love him, trust me. You know what I'm asking, and so I'm only going to say this a few more times, in a few more ways. And by the way, don't call me again. I'll call you when you've done what I asked. This is, in character, what the President was trying to communicate with the President of Ukraine. It would be funny if it wasn't such a graphic betrayal of the President's oath of office. But as it does represent a real betrayal, there's nothing the President says here that is in America's interest, after all. It is instead the most consequential form of tragedy, for it forces us to confront the remedy the founders provided for such a flagrant abuse of office, impeachment. Now, this matter would not have come to the attention of our committee or the nation's attention without the courage of a single person, the whistleblower. As you know, Director McGuire, more so than perhaps any other area of government since we deal with classified information, the Intelligence Committee is dependent on whistleblowers to reveal wrongdoing when it occurs, when the agencies do not self-report, because outside parties are not allowed to scrutinize your work and to guide us. If that system is allowed to break down, as it did here, if whistleblowers come to understand that they will not be protected, one of 2 things happen. Serious wrongdoing goes unreported, or whistleblowers take matters into their own hands and divulge classified information to the press in violation of the law and placing our national security at risk. This is why the whistleblower system is so vital to us, and why your handling of this urgent complaint is also so troubling. Today we can say for the first time since we have released this morning the whistleblower complaint that you have marked unclassified, that the substance of this call is a core issue, although by no means the only issue raised by the whistleblower's complaint, which was shared with the committee for the first time only late yesterday. By law, the whistleblower complaint, which brought this gross misconduct to light, should have been presented to this committee weeks ago, and by you, Mr. Director, under the clear letter of the law. And yet it wasn't. Director McGuire, I was very pleased when you were named acting director. If Sue Gordon was not going to remain, I was grateful that a man of your superb military background was chosen. A Navy SEAL for 36 years and director of the National Counterterrorism Center since December 2018. Your credentials are impressive. And in the limited interactions that we have had since you became director of NCTC, you have struck me as a good and decent man, which makes your actions over the last month all the more bewildering. Why you chose not to provide the complaint to this committee as required by law. Why you chose to seek a second opinion on whether shall really means shall under the statute. Why you chose to go to a department led by a man, Bill Barr, who himself is implicated in the complaint and believes that he exists to serve the interest of the president, not the office itself, mind you, or the public interest, but the interest of the person of Donald Trump. Why you chose to allow the subject of the complaint to play a role in deciding whether Congress would ever see the complaint. Why you stood silent when an intelligence professional under your care and protection was ridiculed by the president, was accused of potentially betraying his or her country, when that whistleblower, by their very act of coming forward, has shown more dedication to country, more of an understanding of the president's oath of office than the president himself. We look forward to your explanation. Ranking Member Nunes.
Thank the gentleman. I want to congratulate the Democrats on the rollout of their latest information warfare operation against the president and their extraordinary ability to once again enlist the mainstream media in their campaign. This operation began with media reports from the prime instigators of the Russia collusion hoax that a whistleblower is claiming President Trump made nefarious promise to a foreign leader. The released transcript of that call has already debunked that central assertion. But that didn't matter. The Democrats simply moved the goalposts and began claiming that there doesn't need to be a quid pro quo for this conversation to serve as the basis for impeaching the president. Speaker Pelosi went further when asked earlier if she would put brakes on impeachment if the transcript turned out to be benign. She responded, quote, "So there you go. If the whistleblower operation doesn't work out, the Democrats and their media, we have candidates, quote, we have many candidates for impeachable offenses." That was her quote. So there you go. If the whistleblower operation doesn't work out, the Democrats and their media assets can always drum up something else. And what other information has come to light since the original false report of a promise being made? We've learned the following. The complaint relied on hearsay evidence provided by the whistleblower. The Inspector General did not know the contents of the phone call at issue. The Inspector General found the whistleblower displayed arguable political bias against Trump. The Department of Justice investigated the complaint and determined no action was warranted. The Ukrainian president denies being pressured by President Trump. So once again, this supposed scandal ends up being nothing like what we were told. And once again, the Democrats, their media mouthpieces, and a cabal of leakers are ginning up a fake story with no regard to the monumental damage they're causing to our public institutions and to trust in government, and without acknowledging all the false stories they propagated in the past, including countless allegations that Trump campaign colluded with Russia to hack the 2016 election. We're supposed to forget about all those stories, but believe this one. In short, what we have with this storyline is another Steele dossier. I'll note here that in the Democrats' mania to overturn the 2016 elections, everything they touch gets hopelessly politicized. With the Russia hoax, it was our intelligence agencies which were turned into a political weapon to attack the president. And now today, the whistleblower process is the casualty. Until about a week ago, the need to protect that process was a primary bipartisan concern of this committee. But if the Democrats were really concerned with defending that process, they would have pursued this matter with a quiet, sober inquiry, as we do for all whistleblowers. But that would have been useless for them. They don't want answers. They want a public spectacle. And so we've been treated to an unending parade of press releases, press conferences, and fake news stories. This hearing itself is another example. Whistleblower inquiries should not be held in public at all. As our Senate counterparts, both Democrats and Republicans, obviously understand, their hearing with Mr. McGuire is behind closed doors. But again, that only makes sense when your goal is to get information, not to create a media frenzy. The current hysteria has something else in common with the Russia hoax. Back then, they accused the Trump campaign of colluding with Russians when the Democrats themselves were colluding with Russians and preparing the Steele dossier. Today, they accuse the president of pressuring Ukrainians to take actions that would help himself or hurt his political opponents. And yet there are numerous examples of Democrats doing the exact same thing. Joe Biden bragged that he extorted the Ukrainians into firing a prosecutor who happened to be investigating Biden's own son. 3 Democratic senators wrote a letter pressuring the Ukrainian general prosecutor to reopen the investigation into former Trump campaign officials. Another Democratic senator went to Ukraine and pressured the Ukrainian president not to investigate corruption allegations involving Joe Biden's son. According to Ukrainian officials, the Democratic National Committee contractor Alexandra Chalupa tried to get Ukrainian officials to provide dirt on Trump associates and tried to get the former Ukrainian president to comment publicly on alleged ties to Russia. Ukrainian official Sergei Lyshenko was a source for Nellie Orr, wife of Department of Justice official Bruce Orr, as she worked on the anti-Trump operation conducted by Fusion GPS and funded by the Democrats. And of course, Democrats on this very committee negotiated with people who they thought were Ukrainians in order to obtain nude pictures of Trump. People can reasonably ask why the Democrats are so determined to impeach this president when in just a year they'll have a chance. In fact, one Democratic congressman, one of the first to call for Trump's impeachment, gave us the answer when he said, quote, "I'm concerned that if we don't impeach the president, he will get reelected," unquote. Winning elections is hard, and when you compete, you have no guarantee you'll win. But the American people do have a say in this, and they made their voices heard in the last presidential election. This latest gambit by the Democrats to overturn the people's mandate is unhinged and dangerous. They should end the entire dishonest, grotesque spectacle and get back to work to solving problems, which is what every member of this committee was sent here to do. Judging by today's charade, the chances of that happening anytime soon are 0 to none. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Director, would you rise for the oath and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. The record will reflect that the witness has been duly sworn. Director McGuire, would you agree that the whistleblower complaint alleges serious wrongdoing by the President of the United States?
Mr. Chairman, the whistleblower...
Well, actually, I apologize, Director. Let me recognize you for your opening statement, and you may take as much time as you need.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Schiff, Ranking Member Nunes, and members of the committee, good morning. I'd like to begin by thanking the Chairman and the committee for agreeing to postpone this hearing for 1 week. This provided sufficient time to allow the executive branch to successfully complete its consultations regarding how to accommodate the committee's request. Mr. Chairman, I've told you this on several occasions, and I would like to say this publicly. I respect you, I respect this committee, and I welcome and take seriously the committee's oversight role. During my confirmation process to be the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, I told the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence that congressional oversight of the intelligence activities is critical and essential to successful operations with the intelligence community. Having served as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center for 8 months and as the acting director of national intelligence for the past 6 weeks, I continue to believe strongly that the role of congressional oversight. As I pledged to the Senate, I pledge to you today that I will continue to work closely with Congress while I'm serving either in this capacity as acting director of national counterterrorism or when I return to the National Counterterrorism Center to ensure you are fully and currently informed of intelligence activities to facilitate your ability to perform your oversight of the intelligence community. The American people expect us to keep them safe. The intelligence community cannot do that without this committee's support. Before I turn to the matter of hand, there are a few things I would like to say. I am not partisan. and I am not political. I believe in a life of service, and I am honored to be a public servant. I served under 8 presidents while I was in uniform. I have taken the oath to the Constitution 11 times. The first time when I was sworn into the United States Navy in 1974, and 9 times during my subsequent promotions in the United States Navy. Most recently, former Director Dan Coates administered the oath of office last December when I became the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. I agree with you. The oath is sacred. It's the foundation of our Constitution. The oath to me means not only that I swear true faith and allegiance to that sacred document, but more importantly, I view it as a covenant I have with my workforce that I lead and every American, that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of my office. I come from a long line of public servants who have stepped forward even in the most difficult times and austere times to support and defend our country. When I took my uniform off in July of 2010, it was the first time in 70 years that an immediate member of my family was not wearing the cloth of the nation. As a Naval Special Warfare Officer, I had the honor of commanding at every level in the SEAL community. It was at times very demanding, but the rewards of serving in America's Special Operations community more than make up for the demands. After my retirement, I was fortunate to work for a great private sector firm. I left the business world after 3 years to lead a nonprofit charity. Some question why I would leave a promising business career to run a charity. The answer was quite simple. It was another opportunity to serve. I led a foundation dedicated to honoring the sacrifice of our fallen and severely wounded special operators. The foundation I led enabled hundreds of children of our fallen to attend college. It was extremely meaningful and rewarding. In the winter of 2018, I was asked by former Director Dan Coates to return to government service to lead the National Counterterrorism Center. This request was totally unexpected and was not a position I sought. But then again, it was another opportunity to serve my country. In particular, I knew that many of the young sailors and junior officers that I had trained 20 years earlier were now senior combat veterans, deploying and still sacrificing. I decided if they could continue to serve, returning to government service was the very least I could do. And now, here I am, sitting before you as the Acting Director of National Intelligence. With last month's departure of Dan Coates and Sue Gordon, 2 exceptional leaders and friends, I was asked to step into their very big shoes and lead the intelligence community until the President nominates and the Senate confirms the next Director of National Intelligence. I accepted this responsibility because I love this country. I have a deep and profound respect for the men and women of our intelligence community and the mission we execute every day on behalf of the American people. Throughout my career, I have served and led through turbulent times. I have governed every action by the following criteria. It must be legal, it must be moral, and it must be ethical. No one can take an individual's integrity away. It can only be given away. If every action meets those criteria, you will always be a person of integrity. In my nearly 4 decades of public service, my integrity has never been questioned until now. I'm here today to unequivocally state that as acting DNI, I will continue the same faithful and nonpartisan support in a matter that adheres to the Constitution and the laws of this great country, as long as I serve in this position for whatever period of time that may be. I want to make it clear that I have upheld my responsibility to follow the law every step of the way in the matter that is before us today. I want to also state my support for the whistleblower and the rights and the laws. Whistleblowing has a long history in our country, dating back to the Continental Congress. This is not surprising because as a nation, we desire for good government. Therefore, we must protect those who demonstrate courage to report alleged wrongdoing, whether on the battlefield or in the workplace. Indeed, at the start of ethics training in the executive branch each year, we are reminded that public service is a public trust. And as public servants, we have a solemn responsibility to do what's right, which includes reporting concerns of waste, fraud, and abuse and bringing such matters to the attention of Congress under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. I applaud all employees who come forward under this act. I am committed to ensuring that all whistleblower complaints are handled appropriately and to protecting the rights of whistleblowers. In this case, the complainant raised a matter with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. The Inspector General is properly protecting the complainant's identity and will not permit the complainant to be subject to any retaliation or adverse consequences for communicating the complaint to the Inspector General. Upholding the integrity of the intelligence community and the workforce is my #1 priority. Throughout my career, I relied on the men and women of the intelligence community to do their jobs so I could do mine, and I could personally attest that their efforts saved lives. I would now like to turn to the complaint and provide a general background on how we got to where we are today. On August 26th, the Inspector General forwarded a complaint to me from an employee in the intelligence community. The Inspector General stated that the complaint raised an urgent concern, a legally defined term under Whistleblower Protection Act that has been discussed at length in our letters to the committee on September 16 and 17. Before I turn to the discussion about whether the complaint meets the definition of urgent concern, I first want to talk about an even more fundamental issue. Upon reviewing the complaint, we were immediately struck by the fact that many of the allegations of the complaint are based on a conversation between the President and another foreign leader. Such calls are typically subject to executive privilege. As a result, we consulted with the White House counsel's office, and we were advised that much of the information in the complaint was, in fact, subject to executive privilege, a privilege that I do not have the authority to waive. Because of that, we were unable to immediately share the details of the complaint with this committee, but continued to consult with the White House counsels in an effort to do so. Yesterday, the President released the transcripts of the call in question, and therefore, we are now able to disclose the details of both complaint and the Inspector General's letter transmitting to us. As a result, I have provided the House and Senate Intelligence Committees with the full, unredacted complaint, as well as the Inspector General's letter. Let me also discuss the issue of urgent concern. When transmitting a complaint to me, the Inspector General took the legal position that because the complaint alleges matters of urgent concern, and because he found the allegations to be credible, I was required under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act to forward the complaint to our oversight committees within 7 days of receiving it. As we have previously explained in our letters, urgent concern is a statutorily defined term. To be an urgent concern, the allegations must, in addition to being classified, assert a flagrant, serious problem, abuse, or violation of law, and relate to the funding, administration, or operation of an intelligence activity within the responsibility of the Director of National Intelligence. However, this complaint concerns conduct by someone outside the intelligence community, unrelated to funding, administration, or operation of an intelligence activity under my supervision. Because the allegation on the face did not appear to fall in the statutory framework, my office consulted with the United States Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel and we included the Inspector General in those consultations. After reviewing the complaint and the Inspector General's transmittal letter, the Office of Legal Counsel determined that the complaint's allegations do not meet the statutory requirement, definition concern, legal urgent concern, and found that I was not legally required to transmit the material to our Oversight Committee under the Whistleblower Protection Act. An unclassified version of that Office of Legal Counsel memo was publicly released. As you know, for those of us in the executive branch, Office of Legal Counsel opinions are binding on all of us. In particular, the Office of Legal Counsel opinion states that the President is not a member of the intelligence community, and the communication with the foreign leader involved no intelligence operation or activity aimed at collecting or analyzing foreign intelligence. While this OLC opinion did not require transmission of the complaint to the committees, it did leave me with the discretion to forward the complaint to the committee. However, given the executive privilege issues I discussed, neither the Inspector General nor I were able to share the details of the complaint at the time. When the Inspector General informed me that he still intended to notify the committees of the existence of the complaint, Mr. Chairman, I supported that decision to ensure the committees were kept as informed as possible of this process move forward. I want to raise a few other points about the situation we find ourselves in. First, I want to stress that I believe that the whistleblower and the Inspector General have acted in good faith throughout. I have every reason to believe that they have done everything by the book and followed the law, respecting the privileged nature of the information and patiently waiting while the executive privilege issues were resolved. Wherever possible, we have worked in partnership with the Inspector General on this matter. While we have differing opinions on the issue whether or not it is urgent concern, I strongly believe in the role of the Inspector General. I greatly value the independence he brings and his dedication and his role in keeping me and the committees informed of matters within the Intelligence Committee. Second, although executive privilege prevented us from sharing the details of the complaint with the committees until recently, this does not mean that the complaint was ignored. The Inspector General, in consultation with my office, referred this matter to the Department of Justice for investigation. Finally, I appreciate that in the past, whistleblower complaints may have been provided to Congress regardless of whether they were deemed credible or satisfied the urgent concern requirement. However, I am not familiar with any prior instances where a whistleblower complaint touched on such complicated and sensitive issues, including executive privilege. I believe that this matter is unprecedented. I also believe that I handle this matter in full compliance with the law at all times, and I am committed to doing so, sir. I appreciate the committee providing me this opportunity to discuss this matter and the ongoing commitment to work with the Congress on your important oversight role. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Director. Would you agree that the